Hi there, sometimes all you need is simple elegance, like this quick wire wrap pendant. So let's crack on and get wire wrapping. For this project, the materials we're going to use are 1mm diameter copper wire, which is 18 gauge, 0.4mm diameter copper wire, which is 26 gauge, a bead, mine's 10mm in diameter, but it could be a bit smaller or larger, and then a jump ring and chain to hang it from. And then the tools we need are just your wire cutters, chain nose pliers and round nose pliers. And you can use liver of sulphur to patina it at the end. So we'll start by getting the frame into shape, and I'm using 20cm of the 1mm or 18 gauge wire. I'm going to thread on the bead, get it about central, and then carefully bend each side upwards. I'll make sure I've got equal wire on both sides, and then continue bending to cross over those wires. You can then use your flat nose pliers to make sure those sides are even and get the shape that you want. I'm making quite a small version here, but you could make it a bit larger if you wanted to. Once I've got that teardrop shape, I'm going to put my flat nose pliers in just where the wires cross and bend down that back wire until it's rung in the same path as the other one. I then want to bend the second wire, but I want to make that a rounded curve. This leaves the space at the top to hang the final pendant. And then I want to move the wire that's running down the back over in front of the teardrop shape. So both of my wire ends are at the front. So we're now ready to start wrapping. I've got my 0.4 or 26 gauge wire here, and I've got 150cm, although I probably won't need to use that much. We need to find the centre of that wire, and then we'll coil it onto that inner curve. And I want enough coils to cover that curve up to where it meets the other wire. Now I'm just going to make sure that wire is sitting in front comfortably. So I'll use my pliers just to twist it at the top. And now I'm going to move to my weave. And this wants 2 wraps on the front wire. On this side, that will continue the coil. Then I'm going to take my weaving wire down between the 2 frame wires. And I'll wrap that back frame wire 5 times. All of this weave is just wrapping on 1 wire at a time. So we've got those 5 wraps. And the wire's already going down between the two wires, so I can then move it forward and wrap that front frame wire twice. Then I'll take the weaving wire down between the two frame wires again, and wrap the back wire 5 times. And this 5-2 weave is what we're going to use for the whole project. Now we've got one side started, it's worth moving over and doing exactly the same on the other side. But I'm just going to wrap that front wire twice, which will be the first 2 wraps on that wire. Then take the weaving wire down between the 2 frame wires and across to the back. And I'm just going to adjust it so I'm weaving with my normal weaving hand. Then I'll carry on with my 5 wraps on the back wire and 2 wraps on the front wire. Now I've continued that weave until I've got 3 sets of the 2 wraps on the front wire. And at this point you can check that the wraps at the front are sitting at the same height on each side. And I'll use my pliers just to gently make sure those wires are sitting on top of one another. And then I want to start shaping the rest of the pendant. So I'm going to carefully move those wire ends outwards. And bend them around until they're touching the bottom of the bead. I'll do the same with the other side. And you can check and adjust until you've got even shapes both sides. And then we're going to continue the weave, wrapping 5 times on what's now the inner wire, which I've got on there already. And then coming up between the wires and across to wrap twice on that outer wire. The only difference now is that we've got an increasing gap between the 2 wires. And we just need to make sure that we're not pulling the 2 wires back together again as we wrap. And then we'll move back over and wrap that inner wire 5 times again, continuing that 5-2 weave as before. The reason for having those 2 wraps on the outside wire is to make sure we've got enough wraps on that weaving wire to hold the frame wire in place. And once we've wrapped a section of one side, we can move over and do exactly the same on the other side. The reason for switching between the 2 sides frequently is to make sure that we're keeping them both symmetrical. And we can just keep checking that those wraps on the outside wires are level each side. Now before we get to the bottom of that curve, I want to shape the frame wires a bit more. And this time we're going to bend them round and take them so they're crossing the inside frame wire, just where it meets the bead. And I'll just make sure they're even, adjust if necessary. And then we can continue wrapping. We do need to be a little bit careful with the weaving wire now, as we're threading it through a smaller space, and it does have a bit of a tendency to want to kink. Because this is now quite a severe curve, I want to make sure that those spokes, where the weaving wire is going to the outer wire, are well spaced around that curve. And depending on your curve, you might need to reduce the number of wraps on the inner wire. Now I've got 4 wraps on the inner wire, and I'm up to where the 2 frame wires cross. So I'm going to leave it there and finish the other side up to the same point. And just before that frame wire crosses over, I want to wrap it for one last pair. You might just need to adjust where everything sits to make sure that happens, and push your weaving wire around into position. You can use your pliers for this if you want. I just find my nails a little bit handier, although it's probably a bad habit. We can then finish the weaving with 2 or 3 wraps on that inner frame wire to take it right up to the bead. I want at least 2 just to hold that weaving wire in place. And then I'll repeat for the other side. And then trim off the excess weaving wire. And make sure the ends are tucked in. We'll then need to finish off those frame wires, and I'm just going to bend them round a little bit more. Make sure they're symmetrical. And I'm trimming them just where they meet that inner frame wire. But as you can see, they're still sitting forwards of that. So I'll just take in my flat nose pliers and move them backwards. So they're actually meeting that inner frame wire. And you can see how the wire's crossing at the point there as well. And that's the pendant finished, and you can leave it the bright copper colour, or as I've done, patina it with some liver sulphur. Then you just need to thread the jump ring through and attach the chain. And the pendant's finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, hit that like button below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and head over to my website for more hints, tips and projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.